Hi, I'm Bill Malik. Today I'm going to be presenting a joint solution from EnterpriseWeb and Snowflake, which enables telco-grade agentic AI and multi-domain autonomous networking. Together, EnterpriseWeb and Snowflake offer a solution for intent-based orchestration and agentic AI. I'm not going to go into all the details. You can freeze and look at them if you want. But overall, you'll see that EnterpriseWeb deploys into Snowpark containers. It unlocks the power of the network data in Snowflake and leverages other Snowflake services like Cortex to deliver a full solution for telco-grade AI that allows users to talk to the network, perform AI ops, do text-to-SQL transformations, and so on. The demo scenario will be a customer in Snowflake with aggregated network data, which connects to EnterpriseWeb and uses its Telecom Ontology to enhance that data, adding things like TMF Open API specs and so on, wrapping them with model context protocol so that agents can talk to them, and eventually building an agent in EnterpriseWeb that allows people to talk to the network, to design, deploy, and manage services over Snowflake's AI Data Cloud. The use case will be a secure 5G gateway featuring open source components from the Linux Foundation, its AetherStack for a 5G core, and Chameleon for an IMS. That core will be deployed directly by EnterpriseWeb, and we'll use some Ansible playbooks in actually demonstrating federation of the deployment of the IMS. And then we'll also have an integration with ServiceNow to show you some incident management capabilities integrated with our platform. The demo itself is going to be broken up into a 4-part series. We're going to start with a zero-copy, no-code integration between EnterpriseWeb and Snowflake. What we'll be focusing on is starting with effectively a flat data set that might be just aggregated for network elements. And then what you'll see is that when we connect that to EnterpriseWeb, the results are a set of objects that are going to be enriched by our ontology. So they provide entities and metrics that are going to go over the top of the AI Data Cloud. This will include taking basic network elements like pods, containers, routers, the kinds of elements that are running, adding abstractions for services, functions, and so on over the top, and then actually adding things like standards-based interfaces, including things like the ODA service inventory, so that an agent can query them. And then future sessions will actually show us utilizing that connection to Snowflake. So we're going to start with an instance of Snowflake that isn't yet connected to the EnterpriseWeb platform so that we can get a step-by-step view of how we enrich the data and how that bi-directional relationship between the two products works. So we start out with a typical telecom ontology, a simple sort of flat set of data about network elements and the metrics connected to them, so state and telemetry, etc., that's going to be connected to each. If we look at what's in the table, we'll see that it's elements that are at the level of things like routers, ports, switches, containers, and pods. So there's nothing with a service level abstraction here, which is really what our goal is going to be. Our agent is going to be deploying services and so on. Well, first thing we're going to need to be able to do is recognize the services that are basically, if you want, running over these network elements, and then start to manage them, and then we'll go forward from there. So let's start by making a connection to this data cloud. If we go into EnterpriseWeb, we have what we call our knowledge plane. It's just a module in EnterpriseWeb that's used for making connections to things like a Snowflake inventory, for instance. So we're going to go ahead and create a new collection, and this is just a model-driven process led by the ontology for how we would create such a connector. So Snowflake inventory. We just specify the endpoint that we want to connect to, upload a token file so that we can make a connection. And what the system is going to do is it's going to follow those links. It's going to identify that this is probably a Snowflake warehouse. And you can see there are many other types that it might be identifying, but it's a learning system. It's seen Snowflake before. At this point, it's pretty confident. So we're going to confirm that this indeed is a Snowflake warehouse. And you'll see within that split second, the system actually interrogated the data that was on the other side. So it looked at the schemas and other DDLs and so on that were in Snowflake. It was able to determine that the information there could really be projected into an ODA service inventory or, again, a sort of general EnterpriseWeb inventory. So let's go ahead and select the ODA inventory. We're going to permission the system to write back state. And again, this is borrowing from the permissions that are in Snowflake, so all of its governance, horizon, and so on is going to be enforced here. So since we're able to actually interact with it using our Snowflake user, we have that capability, so we're going to go ahead and actually push back a whole lot of information. We're going to enrich what's in Snowflake, not just read from it. And then what you'll see is if we interrogate that data, which is what the system did, it algorithmically mapped what it found there to our ontology. It was able to identify that that elements table had a lot more capability in it than just identifying basically those sort of network types. What you're able to do is synthesize tables for services and functions. And if you go further down here, you'll actually see what those end up looking like. So we can push back information, and we can even push back relationships. So once we establish a graph of how these things are connected, we can push back additional detail into the SQL tables that are found there. There will be a lot more information here that we can look at later, but let's go ahead and authorize the system to make that connection. Right? So zero copy, it's already something that our system is connected to, a platform overall. If we were to go into any of our other modules, we have one here called our network manager. It's used for actually looking at network elements. What we'd find if we go in there is that that inventory that we saw in Snowflake is already represented inside EnterpriseWeb. What we did was we took the objects, the routers and the switches that you saw a moment ago, and we were able to layer on top of that abstractions like services, functions, and so on that were found there. And if we drill into any one of those elements, what we'll find is the system was able to build an object around it, synthesize tables behind it to represent this, autofill all the properties, and actually create a bunch of standards-based interfaces so that I can work with what is basically a service that's already being described in Snowflake. So I can see that this particular service is an IMS, they call it, by a particular vendor. And again, it's by looking at the characteristics of what pods and containers and so on were deployed. I can actually see at any point the state and telemetry that's being pulled back and represented, mapped from Snowflake. I can get a life cycle of how our system interacts with it, actually literally to the point of where it was identified being pulled out of a particular Snowflake inventory. I can see all those standards-based interfaces that we're generating around it. So a TM forum, REST API for being able to actually manage this as a service inventory element, or even execute process flows over that service. So there's a lot of different detail that I get here. There is, importantly, a set of agent-based interfaces, so that when we get to the point of actually building a land graph agent, this is what the system is quite literally consuming. So our ODA service inventory, if an agent needs to know about the service, this is the kind of information that's provided. So a TM forum interface in all of its detail, descriptions down to the level of a human kind of description, what this is, what an IMS actually does, that type of network service, and then all of the details per TMF that would be required for managing the service element. Right? So things like what they call service characteristics, the way that data is actually encoded, life cycles, component level details, as much detail as you might possibly need for every one of these services so that an agent can understand and work with them. And then the other thing is that the other benefits in EnterpriseWeb that really aren't as sort of direct to this this demo, but are important to know, is that behind the scenes you can visualize all of these graphs that we're pulling out. Right? So this is a look at what that inventory in Snowflake actually represents as far as connected details. You can slice and dice this as an engineer if you want to see only the services that it represents and how they're connected, if you care about pods, ports or not, and so on. So it gives you at a glance capability already over Snowflake. And if you go back into Snowflake itself, you'll see on the other end, if we refresh the tables here, you'll see the added, again, some of the enriched values. So you can see that there's a service table that was rendered or synthesized in Snowflake with details on each one of those elements that we were just pulling from. And there'll be, of course, cross-references and so on to all of the tables. So this establishes for us basically a view and an interface into Snowflake so that we can use it when we get to the point of building agents in the next phase of the demo. In this session, you saw how we were able to establish a zero-copy, no-code integration between EnterpriseWeb and Snowflake in a matter of seconds. We just simply specified the connection details, allowed EnterpriseWeb's ontology to inspect the data that was there, and then enrich it with things like adding services and function abstractions over the top, and establishing a two-way connection between the systems, which allowed us to do things like visualize the graph of services of the service topology in EnterpriseWeb and push back value-added data into the Snowflake Data Cloud. In future sessions, you will see me utilize the connection that we exposed via MCP, so that ODA inventory abstraction that we created. You'll be able to see how an agent is able to utilize that to do operations, including talking to your network. Be sure to watch the other demos in the series. Thank you.